4 ancient sites and discoveries you need to know about. The world is filled with countless mysteries, and some of the strangest ones come from our various ancient cultures. The 4 cases on this list prove there's still so much more we don't know about Earth and our origins. These are 4 ancient sites and discoveries you need to know about. Number 4. Hidden Mayan civilization. Close to the existing ancient Mayan city of Tikal in southern Mexico, archaeologists were astounded when they found 61,000 hidden Mayan structures engulfed by the forest. Using laser mapping technology called Lidar, they took to the skies and mapped the tropical lowlands of the Guatemalan jungle nearby to see if there were any existing Mayan structures in the area. To their shock, the snapshot showed temples, highways, homes, and various structures hiding underneath the thick jungle canopy. It showed how the Mayans thrived and altered their landscape as they lived between 1000 BC to 1500 AD. During the height of their culture, they occupied and prospered in the areas around southern Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and western Honduras. Mayan culture is rich, and they left behind countless stone, wood, and ceramic items. They built large temples, had kings and queens, and created their own hieroglyphics, not to mention the fact that they had intense knowledge of astronomy and mathematics. The first study of the area was conducted in 2016 when Juan Fernandez Diaz, a researcher at the National Center for Airborne Laser Mapping at the University of Houston, along with a team, flew and mapped over 800 square miles of forest. According to him, he was most surprised when he saw the vast wetlands were made up of channels and canals. He believes that during the Mayan Empire, the farmlands looked the same as the farms we see in present-day Southeast Asia. They estimate approximately 7 to 11 million Mayans lived in this area during what they term as the Late Classic period, which was between 650 to 800 AD. This is much more than what they had initially estimated survived or thrived in the jungles of Mexico and Guatemala. While the finding itself is a marvel, archaeologists say this is just the beginning. They will still need to trek and brave the jungles to confirm the location of the fortresses and the ruins. They are also hoping to map out the rest of the Mayan Biosphere Reserve to see if there are other structures that are yet to be uncovered, which undoubtedly there most likely are. Number 3. Ricard Structure. Now that we have satellites circling Earth, it's no surprise we're finding unusual structures that can only be seen from high above the ground. One of these mysterious structures is found in Mauritania, Africa, right smack in the middle of the Sahara Desert, and it's dubbed as the Ricard Structure, or the Eye of Africa. The stunning location has been photographed multiple times by astronauts from the International Space Station as they pass by the area throughout the day. The Ricard Structure offers a glorious spectacle, resembling a giant circular eye in a striking blue shade when seen from above. It measures about 50 kilometers wide and was once believed to be created from an asteroid impact because of its circular shape. Then it was speculated it was formed from a volcanic eruption, even though there's a lack of volcanic rocks around. And now, many are just saying it's the remnants of an eroded geological dome that collapsed. While these origin theories are fascinating, there are some who say the structure could be much more than that. In fact, some believe the Ricard Structure is what remains of the mythical Atlantis, and that this place, found above sea level, is where it actually existed thousands of years ago. Depending on who you ask, the city of Atlantis is fiction, something Plato used as an example for teaching the story of morality and governance. But there are those who think otherwise and say Atlantis did in fact exist. Even Plato proclaimed that even though the story sounded like nonsense, he was telling the truth, as the legend had been passed down verbally throughout the years. YouTube channels like Bright Insight and various people like George S. Alexander are offering reasons the Ricard Structure could be where the city of Atlantis was once located. The first thing they point to is that the measurements of Atlantis given by Plato and this location match up perfectly. What's more, Plato describes Atlantis as being surrounded in the north by mountains noted for their beauty and number. This is also the case with the Ricard Structure. Believers also point to the fact that Plato described Atlantis as having 3 concentric circles flanked by land and water. The circular design of the Ricard structure is noted for its distinct-looking rings, pointing to the possibility that this theory could be real. Aside from that, people say the Sahara, even though it's a desert now, was once a flourishing area covered by forests and water. While there's no absolute proof the Ricard structure could be Atlantis after all, it is a fascinating theory worth looking into. Number 2. The Hobbits. For many of us, we only know of the Hobbits from J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, but did you know real-life hobbits might have actually existed here on Earth? Discovered in Flores, a small island in Indonesia, the first fossil found was the remains of a cave woman who stood approximately 3 feet tall. She was uncovered with an almost complete skull and a partial skeleton with leg bones, portions of the feet, hands, pelvis, and other bone fragments. Dubbed as Homo floresiensis, about 8 specimens have been found so far that are dated to living roughly 80,000 years ago. However, the exact dates and where they came from continue to be debated among the scientific community. The official name, Homo floresiensis, is used because they are found only on the island of Flores, but because of their small stature, they've been dubbed by the media as the Hobbits. Using the fossil remains, scientists approximate that they had a smaller brain compared to Homo sapiens, about 1/3 the size. They also had bigger feet in proportion to their body. Stone tools were found on Flores along with the fossil remains, so it's believed the group made their own stone tools as well. As for theories as to where they came from, one prevailing thought is they evolved from Homo erectus. The Homo erectus had been around since 1.9 million years ago. Originally from Africa, they traveled towards Asia, possibly landing in Indonesia or the Flores over time, and evolving over hundreds of thousands of years into the small Homo floresiensis. Another theory is that they actually descended from Homo habilis, another primitive form of humans, but scientists aren't certain since they didn't think the Homo habilis ever left Africa. One baffling trait for the Hobbits, though, is their small stature. Currently on the island of Flores, there exist modern pygmy tribes. These are local communities and groups where the stature is deemed small for modern man, but not nearly as tiny as the hobbits that existed. But scientists believe their ancestors might have mated with Homo floresiensis, and their lineage is shorter because of this. As for what drove Homo floresiensis to extinction, many believe they encountered modern Homo erectus and were driven to extinction or killed. Curiously, legends about small human-like creatures still persist in Java and even Flores today. In Java, there's the legend of orang pendek, a creature that lives in the mountain regions of Sumatra. They're described as 30 to 60 inches tall, having human-like noses and strong upper bodies. For hundreds of years, sightings of the orang pendek have been reported by locals and Dutch colonists, as well as Western scientists. But closer to the hobbits is the legend of the Ibu Gogo, passed on to the locals of Flores. Dubbed as the grandmother who eats everything, the Ibu Gogo is a bipedal creature about 55 inches tall. It speaks its own language but has the capacity to mimic human speech. Local legends of the Ibu Gogo are reported by Portuguese explorers who say the creature stole food from the locals and kidnapped their children. It's also said most of the Ibu Gogo were killed by modern humans who arrived on the island, save for one couple who ran to the forest and thrived there. One more recent find in the Philippines is now opening the possibility that the hobbits might be more archaic than once thought. Scientists uncovered a large cache of rhino bones along with dozens of stone tools in Luzon, Philippines. The rhino bones are 75% intact with signs of scarring from tools on the leg bones and ribs. The team dated the bones to approximately 709,000 years old, with the lower sediment layers dating back to 727,000 and the upper sediment layers to around 710,000. The baffling thing for scientists is who these ancient people might have been. Scientists have ruled out Homo sapiens since they evolved in Africa thousands of years later. Although Homo erectus might have been the likely suspect, some think it's possible older descendants of the Homo floresiensis might have lived and occupied the island back then. After all, Flores, Indonesia is only 3,000 kilometers to the south. There's no current evidence as to who the rhino butchers might be, but the discovery of Homo floresiensis points to the fact that ancient forms and even unknown human species may have evolved in Southeast Asia or migrated to the area. Today, the mystery of the Homo floresiensis, or the Hobbits, continues to remain one of the most baffling and intriguing ideas in human evolution that is hard to explain. Number 1. Ancient man as a global civilization. Despite our modern society, the origins of man and how humanity has grown over the years is still a complete mystery. Our textbooks say ancient man was primitive, that our current time as humans means we are at the pinnacle of evolution and no other civilization existed here on Earth ever reached as far as we have. While many of us function with this current view in mind, we could also be completely wrong. More and more people are now questioning whether what our textbooks and history says is actually true. In fact, it's being proposed that before us, ancient man was actually a global civilization comprised of highly advanced cultures that traveled, navigated the world, explored and built complex structures and technology like we are doing right now. For those who believe, they say that a large global civilization existed but disappeared and declined after a major cataclysmic incident. This event acted as a reset button for advanced ancient man, wiping out much of Earth's species, including humans, and leaving whatever survived to start from almost zero. So let's start with the cataclysmic events. It's said there were two main global impacts from an asteroid in the past. The first happened 12,900 years ago, and then another 1,400 years later, or 11,600 years ago. The latter is pointed to as the reason for the rapid end of the Ice Age and the abrupt rise in sea level and temperatures worldwide. Curiously, an impact crater was found on the Greenland ice shelf in 2015. The Hiawatha crater is 19 miles wide and lies underneath more than half a mile of ice. Many of the scientists believe the crater impact may have occurred close to 13,000 years ago, so it could either be the first or the second large cataclysmic event. It's then possible that with the impact of the asteroid, this drove the Earth's climate to rise in a matter of weeks, not to mention allow meltwater to descend into the Atlantic, flooding any coastal habitats or civilizations that might have existed. Not only that, the plunge in temperature killed off large mammals via lack of food, fires, and more, causing them to become extinct and eventually die off. While this has evidence backing it up, for skeptics, they still ask if there's anything that could prove mankind was once a global civilization before this global event happened. And yes, there are several things pointing to this. First, there's remnants of great ancient megalithic structures and civilizations found throughout the world. Despite knowing a lot of how these civilizations operated, we know so little about how they actually came to be or what they were like. Most of these civilizations even hold far more advanced knowledge than we do in terms of engineering, math, and astronomy, as showcased through their relics. Yet, modern science still refuses to acknowledge this point since it doesn't fit with the evolution of man from primitive to advanced modern humans like us today. Also, the similarities with how they built the structures and the knowledge they possessed is curious to say the least. What's more, these large structures and civilizations align in an imaginary parallel line intersecting with one another. It seems uncanny to have such large structures built at certain points on the Earth in such precise location points. The similarities in architecture, the use of obelisks, trapezoidal doors, similarities in origin stories, and even knowledge, despite supposedly not having contact or knowledge of one another, doesn't seem to make much sense. How could so many ancient cultures on entirely different continents all create pyramid-shaped structures without ever being in contact with one another? Even more, the artifacts left behind often showcase they had extensive geographical knowledge of the Earth and even the solar system long before we thought possible. Some artifacts that continue to hint at this vast knowledge include the Piri-Reis map, which showcased and mapped the exact depiction of Antarctica before it was even discovered in 1819. It showed the continent before it had ice caps, including mountain regions, tree lines, and rivers. This is just one example, and there are many others. This and so much more point to the possibility that Earth may have hosted a great ancient global civilization. How or why they disappeared may be a matter of debate for some, but for those who believe it's possible we aren't the first ones to harness great technology, build impressive cities, and achieve great things. Ancient mankind likely achieved all this stuff way before we did, but they were wiped out in the blink of an eye and seemingly forgotten about by modern history in the same way. So there were 4 ancient sites and discoveries you need to know about. These ancient structures and mysterious finds may not be accepted by the mainstream, but it's important to realize that we don't have all the answers and are still piecing the story of our past together. We may never get them, but hopefully it's only a matter of time before we find the true answers. New videos are coming out every Wednesday and Saturday, so please remember to subscribe to our channel because you won't want to miss out on those. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you soon.